Today, we are taking a look at a comic that came out in 2021, but for some reason, I did not read it until about 2023. And as soon as I read it, it quickly became one of my favorite stories of the year. And I'm not alone. A lot of people love this comic, and for some reason, it just wasn't on my radar. Or maybe I heard about it and I just ignored it. But it is really a good story worth checking out, and it's called Many Deaths of Laila Starr by Boom Studios. So let's check it out. The Story Grind is brought to you by the stories that I make. Here are some novels that I've written that you can buy on Amazon. I also have some comics works that I'll be releasing soon. If you don't want to miss any updates and you want to follow along with my storytelling journey, subscribe to the monthly email newsletter with the link in the description below. Alright, so here's the pitch for the story. Tell me what you think in the comments below. With humanity on the verge of discovering immortality, the avatar of death is fired and relegated to the world below to live out her now finite days in the body of a 20-something Laila Starr in Mumbai. Struggling with her newfound immortality, Laila has found a way to be placed in the time and place where the creator of immortality will be born. But will Laila take her chance to permanently reverse the course of future history, or does a more shocking fate await her? Interesting pitch, interesting concept, right? This pitch is good, but I think it focuses a lot on the big bad conflict of death and Laila Starr, and it doesn't really talk about or pitch the internal conflict of Laila Starr. And that is such an important part of the story that I think with that missing, it doesn't sound as compelling as it could be. So yeah, I think it would be great to kind of maybe workshop this logline a little bit and see if we can improve it, make it a little bit better. But maybe I'll save that to the end of the video, or maybe in a separate video. But for now, let's get into the story, take it apart piece by piece, study it, analyze it, and see if we can't find some cool things that'll help us become better at storytelling. All right? Before we start, let's take a look at the creative team behind this book. And there's a lot of names in here that I don't think I'm going to be able to pronounce correctly, so here you go. You can look at it. Ram V is probably a name that you recognize. He's doing a lot of indie stuff right now, as well as like Batman and mainstream stuff. He's become a very popular writer right now in the world of comics. Felipe Andrade has been around quite a bit and has done some amazing stuff. It's definitely worth checking out more of their work if you get a chance. So one of the things that struck me about reading this story is that Ramvi makes some pretty bold choices with his storytelling. Choices that I don't think many people can pull off. And as we go through the story, I'll point them out. But here we go. With the first page, we get this introduction to a city, which is Mumbai. And I don't know, what are your first impressions when you look at this? For me, I see color. It is definitely like a very bold and vibrant looking city. And I just love the interpretation of how the city is being depicted. It's almost like sunset, right? You've got like the orange glow on the buildings sort of fading down into this blue like shadowed area of the city. And I think what's really important is looking at the line work Felipe Andrade uses to depict this city. Now, if you ask me as an artist to draw a city, I am drawing buildings, I am drawing windows, I am drawing window sills, I am drawing leaves on trees. I am, unfortunately, I'm drawing all of it, and I am miserable while I'm doing it. So this is such a refreshing way to look at a city and to depict it. Look at his line work. It's so loose and so energetic. I really envy this. I really wish I could draw like this. This is look at the cars. They are blobs, really, but you understand it. Look at the trees. They're almost like architectural in nature. Like if you look at an architectural drawing, you'll see that sometimes they're more impressions than they are actual realistic depictions of trees. But Felipe Andrade has gone in and really created just some great atmosphere with the composition, with the colors, with just his interpretation of Mumbai. And I think this is something that you really need to soak in, because this story takes place in Mumbai, at least the first issue so far. And it really is a character in the story, and you're going to see why in a minute. So we start off this whole story with a disembodied voice. And the voice says, "It began on a Wednesday afternoon as the late December sun was just dipping below the Mumbai skyline." Right? We don't know who's talking right now, just narration. And narration is such a great trick for getting people into the story quickly and getting them engaged. At the same time, narration can also be a crutch, and you have to sort of balance it out, right? You can't just narrate everything, because then you're not going to have characters who are in conflict, who are on an emotional journey. You're going to just be looking at it from the outside in. We don't know who's saying this right now, but we will learn it eventually. But it's just setting the scene, introducing the city, and the city's going to play a big part where all these three disparate stories are intertwining. So we'll move on to page 2, where we get sort of our first view of a character, which is what I'll call the kid. So we move into the city, sort of at ground level, and we are stuck in traffic, where we see a pregnant mother stuck in the city, stuck on the highway, and she is trying to get to a hospital because she's about to give birth. We have a few close-ups of her, and notice how all these panels are like in this very widescreen, horizontal type of format. It's giving sort of a very cinematic vibe, which is really nice. But you have the city, you have the traffic, and then in panel 5, the background drops out and the sound effect kind of takes over, which is a really great way to put a focus on a sound effect of this police officer blowing a whistle. But yeah, she's upset, and we end the page with the statement, "The baby is coming." So from the pitch, we know that this baby is going to be well, maybe we don't know, but let's just, I guess I'm going to spoil it for you. This baby is the one that's going to invent immortality that eventually gets death fired. All right, let's move on to page 3, which is a completely different scene with completely different characters. Here we are at a party, a college party, where people have just graduated, and they are just socializing and having fun. A little bit of different colors, a little bit cooler vibe in this page, and this is where we are introduced to the title character of Laila Starr. But this is not exactly the Laila Starr we're going to be following, and that will become a little bit more clear as we move through this first issue. But I want to point out the art in this and how great it is. I just love the interpretation of people, the way Felipe Andrade draws people. It's just sort of like long and lanky, and like look at panel 4, like the hand of her smoking the cigarette, just those fingers, they're so great. It's just something I wish I could pull off as well. It's just sort of this just having your own style and committing to it and being able to just kind of put it out there. And for me personally, I'm always worrying about if it's reading the way I want it to. So this is so great to just kind of, and it's so great and so refreshing, really, to see a kind of style like this. And again, the colors are also really sell this as well. So we're at this party. We're introduced to Laila Starr. Again, we've got these 6 panels that sort of mirrors the previous page, all very long and rectangular, very cinematic. So in this scene, we get a bit of narration. It says, "It was, for all of them, a moment of precarious balance before life plummeted into the unknown," which is a bit of foreshadowing for this character. So these are the first 3 pages of the story, and I count them as a scene 1, even though technically I feel like each of these moments is a scene, but the way I typically interpret scenes is like a character arc will happen. Like something will have be like positive and end on a negative, or it'll start on a negative and end on a positive. These are almost like little vignettes, little snippets. So just for the purposes of summarizing this and presenting it here in this video, I'm just going to call these first 3 pages scene 1. So let's see, scene 1, 3 pages. We are introduced to 2 characters and the city. Now we're going to move on to scene 2, where we are introduced to death. Now this is really interesting because we are still in the ordinary world in scene 1 and at the beginning of scene 2. And by ordinary world, I mean we are establishing the world building here. And what have we seen so far? A very contemporary setting. We've seen the city. We've seen someone about to give birth. We're seeing someone at a college party. And then in scene 2, page 4, we are introduced to a completely fantastical scene. Which is strange, especially from coming from like a contemporary introduction. So we start off with the narrator continuing saying, and that very evening, in a high place far beyond mortal clouds, Death was taking an elevator to the top of the silvered tower. Such a great introduction for a character, someone who is like sort of this fantastical idea of death. Almost, I would go as far as to say it's like a mythological interpretation of death, and they're taking an elevator, right? Again, sort of fantastical, but yet it's still grounded in a very contemporary type setting. So scene 2 is 5 pages long, and it will be a scene between Death and the CEO, which is going to be God, and their exchange. But I want to kind of talk about how we've had 4 pages now, and we've been introduced to 3 different characters and the city. That to me is a pretty bold move at the start of a comic, to bounce around and dedicate a page to let's say each character, and one of them isn't even born yet. I think, in lesser hands, someone could get really lost. So I really like how Ram V is sort of pulling this off. And I think the thing that really ties this together is the narration. Still, we don't know who is commenting on this story, but it is going to be something that Ram V is going to rely on, and it's going to carry us through a whole bunch of different cutaways and exchanges at the same time, almost a type of cross-cutting, which you would do in filmmaking. I'm not sure if you could pull that off as easily if you didn't have that narration in place. So let's take a closer look at scene 2. We have Death throwing her hand into the closing doors of an elevator, asking everyone to hold the door. We find out from the narrator that she's being called to the top floor, which is a rare thing, and she's a little nervous. So we also see her, she's got like 6 arms. So this is a very different interpretation of the Death that we've seen. This versus a I don't know, Ingmar Bergman type of man with white face paint and a sickle, or the skull and sickle with the hooded figure, right? So or maybe the Brad Pitt in oh shoot, I can't even remember that movie. But very different interpretation of Death. It takes place in Mumbai, so we're going to assume this is like a very Hindi or Hindu. I'm sorry if I apologize if I'm butchering this, because I'm not as familiar with these religions. But I will say that, this is definitely a very different interpretation that I'm used to seeing. So let's take a look at these colors in this scene. Again, sort of very pastel, very bright, colorful pastels. Love the blues in the foreground, like right here on panel 3. We have the background is all pink. I honestly, like when I'm coloring things, I'm not using pink. How often do you use pink in your colors? It's like the idea of using pink is, it usually has sort of a more girly interpretation to it, right? So like to be able to use that and just make it work with these blues and greens is so great. And it really makes me want to use pink more often. It's just sort of just a great level of contrast in the colors as well. Let's see. So we have Death. She takes her elevator ride up to the top floor to meet God, who has looks like 3 different faces. All right, so we have this moment where Death is meeting God, and it's been made clear that they don't meet very often, and she's a little nervous, and she sits down to kind of ask like what's going on. So it's what I really love about this moment is that God is sort of trying to soften things up a little bit for her. He says, "So, Death, tell me, how are things?" And she says, "Things? Yes, work, life, friendship, hobbies, there." And she answers with, "There, what am I doing here, sir?" Such a great way to kind of like cut to the chase. It's in 2 panels, just like sit down and, hey, let's get back to this, because she knows something's going on. And this is something I also want to point out that I absolutely love about this page. And it's just panel 3, where God kind of does a tap, tap, tap. Like he doesn't necessarily want to tell her. So he kind of pauses. And this little tap, tap, tap is such, I don't know, it reads so clearly to me as any type of conversation you have that's a little uncomfortable, that you're trying to avoid saying what you need to say. It's such a great sort of visual beat in this story. And there is sound effects, but it's a wordless panel, right? For me, I just get it. So it's such a great and fun way to show that he is reluctant to deliver this information. And what information does he deliver? He says, "Death, I'm afraid we're letting you go." Now, this is such a great moment because this is technically the inciting incident, right? Up until right before this, he asks, "How long have you been with us?" Feels like an eternity, doesn't it? And she says, "I have actually been here for an eternity," right? She's Death. So the fact that he says, "Yes, Death, I'm afraid we're letting you go," just completely blows up her world. So this is the inciting incident of the story, right? She's going to react to this and then spend the rest of the story trying to bring her life back into balance, back to the moment right before God lays her off. And what is also really nice about this is that the inciting incident is also tied to a point of empathy for us as the readers, right? The idea that she is being laid off is a form of rejection that, not everybody has, but not everybody gets laid off, but everybody has been rejected. And being laid off is a form of rejection in my interpretation. So immediately I'm on board with like, oh man, that really sucks. And it sucks that it's happening to this person, or I should say entity. I don't know if she's a god necessarily in this religion, but I'd say this entity, and she's losing her job, and that's hard to watch, right? It sucks when it happens to you, and it sucks when it happens to other people. So, and the fact that she's Death and she's being laid off is such an interesting concept. And it's one of the hooks for me as a reader where I go, okay, I'm on board. I want to see where this goes. Death gets fired. Now what, right? One other thing that I want to point out on this page is that we've come back to Laila Starr in this last panel on the page. And as you see, we have a narration box here, but it's not the narration of the person who introduced us to this story, who we still haven't met. This is a carryover from God. This is him still having a conversation with Laila Starr. And I want to say, like, the fact that he's still talking and then we are cutting away to a different scene, that is really hard to pull off without confusing people. Like, I don't know if you've read this before I brought the video up, but I would like to see how many people were really confused that, oh, is this the narrator or is this God talking? I have a feeling that everyone's going to say, it's pretty obvious that this conversation is still continuing and that we're cutting away to the mortal Laila Starr at this point. But just sort of a very tricky way of doing things, and I think it's done well. I'm not sure I could ever pull this off, but I do like how it's being done. And it also kind of gives us this interpretation, or this sort of introduction, I should say, that we're going to be cutting back and forth between different characters during scenes. And you're going to start to see a lot of that. Very cinematic in a way. All right, so let's move on to the next page, where we see Death go through the various stages of grief, right? Anger, denial, bargaining, all of that. I don't have the list in front of me, but there is a list of stages of grief. So, and I think everybody goes through this when they are rejected, or I guess rejected would be the way to say it. So she immediately says, "What?" And he tries to calm her down. He tries to minimize it a little bit. And he explains to her that I have a file here where a baby will be born, and that baby will invent immortality, so we no longer have a need for you as Death. She tries to bargain and say, "Send a plague down," but he's not going to do that, and she asks, "What am I supposed to do?" So I'm going to end this scene here, even though the next scene still takes place in sort of the heaven that we've just been in. I'm going to end the scene. So this is the end of scene 2 for me, because the conversation between God and Laila Starr ends. And as I mentioned before, the scene, it starts on a positive charge, right? She's going into the elevator, and it ends on that negative charge where she's been laid off or fired. So one of the other things that I really want to point out is also how the Ramvia's sort of corporatized heaven in a way. This is such a great way to get people on board with any type of like religion or mythology, right? Putting it in sort of this corporate environment where God is the CEO and Death is just an employee that gets fired. One of the things that I want to point out, that I think if you are one of those readers who don't like plot holes, you're probably having a huge question right now. Now, for me as a reader, I tend to see plot holes, especially at the beginning of a story, and I overlook them. It's only like when they start showing up later on in a story that I will start to get a little frustrated, and maybe like, well, eventually I have a tolerance for it. And once it hits that tolerance level, I'll give up on the story. But when it's at the beginning of the story, I don't really have an issue with it. But if you're one of those sticklers, and I say this because in some of the stories that I've published, I am starting to have reviewers come out and really be sticklers about certain plot points. And it's just sort of strange to me that other people don't let things go as well as I do. So if you're a stickler, you're probably asking, wait a minute, if this baby is being born right now and they're firing Death right now, what's going to happen in the next 25 to 40 years where this baby is growing up before they invent immortality? Are people just not going to die in those like 4 decades? It's never really answered in this story. I'm okay with that, right? It doesn't matter to me. But if you're out there and you are very much irritated by plot holes, this might snag you a little bit. But to each their own, right? So we're going to continue walking through this story, whether you're stuck on that or not. So here we go. All right, scene 3, 2 pages. We've got Death coming out of God's office. The narration starts up again from this disembodied voice. We still don't know who it is. We find out Death will be given a human body, essentially. She'll be sent down to Earth. Now that she's been laid off, she's no longer needed. She's going to be sent down to Earth to live her life out as a mortal. And this is a very important part of the story to me, because this really ties into her character arc. So at first we've had this big bad conflict. Death is laid off from her job, and now we're getting to the character arc, which is like a little bit more subtle, where Death has to live as a mortal, and we get to see what that's going to be like. And this is really going to change her internal character arc as well. This is the job of her being immortal, right? It's not like she's just cast out. No, but the fact that she's become immortal, she's going to live on Earth. She's going to encounter this baby at some point. We're going to see the choices she's going to have to make and see how that changes her as a character, which is, to me, is the best part of this story. I mean, the concept is great, but watching a character change throughout a story is what I'm into stories for. I don't know about you, but that's what stories are for me. It's just watching characters that I can empathize with encounter their own obstacles and come out of the other end as a different person or different entity, as in this case. So here we are on page 8. Death exits God's office, and we get to see that she is dealing or maybe reeling from the news. The narration kicks back in, and we start to cut back and forth between scenes again. Again, sort of a really great device, which is something that I'm probably going to use at some point. It's such a great technique of using the narration to kind of like join 3 different scenes together. But we get to see that Laila Starr, the mortal, has fallen out of the window, right? And then she's fastly approaching the ground. We have sort of the students looking down, horrified as she hits the ground. We cut to the scene of the mother giving birth, and then we have the baby being born. Again, sort of all stitched together with this narration. Page 9, we get this sort of great, maybe on the nose panel, first panel of elevator button showing her going down. Okay, yeah, it's I'm not a huge fan of it, but it does work. Sure. So then we see a conversation between Death and God's assistant as Death has her box of things and she exits the office, which is pretty hilarious. And then we find out that Death has seen the file of where this baby is being born. And she asks the assistant to give her a body near the baby. The assistant says, "Why? What are you going to do, Death?" And Death says, "That's none of your business, is it? I'll be immortal then. My actions, my consequences. Free will, day of judgment, and all that." And a nice sort of silent panel of her staring at the assistant. And then she says off panel, "Do you really want to know?" And then we end this page with, I think, the beginning of the next scene, which is strange. I don't usually see people starting scenes in the middle of the page anymore. I think a lot of people adhere to that sort of Alan Moore theory of like starting a new page, starting a new scene on a new page, so there's like a clear delineation. But this still works, I think, because of that narration that comes back in. So let me back up a little bit, because we're going to see Death bargaining with the assistant. And really, this is the first time that Death has some agency in this story, right? She's been laid off, she's been fired, but now how is she going to get her life back into balance? And what she does is she negotiates with the assistant and says, like, "Hey, put me into a body near where this baby is being born." So right now, we don't know what she's thinking. She's just asked to be put into a body near where the baby is being born, and she ends up in the same hospital, right? So that is the end of Act 1, and we are now launching into the beginning of Act 2. Actually, maybe I wouldn't even go that far, because we don't know what she's thinking or what she wants. So I think in the next scene, it'll be a more clearly delineated Act 1 end and Act 2 beginning. So let's take a look at that. So here we go. This is scene 4. It's 6 pages long, and we see Death entering Laila Starr's body. And for the purposes of this video, instead of calling one person Death and one person Laila Starr, I'm just going to call them, since they're both combined now, I'm just going to call them Laila Starr so we have a clear understanding of. But what I am saying is that Death is inside the body of Laila Starr. She wakes up in sort of like the morgue of the hospital and says, "Oh, that feels awful. This is the first time Death, now in Laila Starr's body, is feeling mortality," right? Sort of a great little comment on mortality. But immediately we hear this voice off panel. It says, "Yeah, well, you were dead for a good 20 minutes or so." Laila Starr picks up a needle and says, "Who are you?" And then we're introduced to a new character, which is a ghost, and her name is Munmun. So Munmun, who's a child, the ghost of a child, says, "You can see me? I'm a ghost. You're not supposed to be able to see me." This is sort of another like little plot hole issue that I have with the story. We have Death seeing a ghost for the first time and not really understanding what a ghost is, but maybe that makes sense because I guess a ghost would not have, who knows why any, I was gonna sit here and try to rationalize why Death would not see a ghost, but this is all make believe, so I don't think I'm going to go down that route, so forgive me. So here we go. Death sees a ghost for the first time, and Munmun, the ghost, is kind of filling her in on what has happened. Her body has died. She's found her name on her little bracelet, which is Laila Starr, and now Laila Starr wants to find this baby. So the ghost Munmun is sort of a little bit of a device that Ramvi has added here, which I think works in some ways and doesn't work in other ways. It works because now we have someone for Laila Starr to talk to, right? She's not just in her head the whole time, which is great because we already have a disembodied voice narrator out there. There's no need to confuse the reader with another like narration box, which is Laila Starr's thinking. Now she has a way to like bounce ideas off of someone else and kind of get the pushback she needs to make change within herself. The issues I have with it is that Death doesn't know what a ghost is, right? At the same time, this ghost is very willing to help. And it feels, and unfortunately it gives her a bit of a flat character feeling because she doesn't have like a desire or need. She's just like, "Oh, hey, you've just woken up after being dead for 20 minutes. Let's go help you on your mission to go find this baby." So in a way it doesn't work necessarily. Maybe a good way to fix that is to have given the ghost like a bit of a quid pro quo where maybe there's a bit of an exchange, like, "Hey, Death, if you get back into heaven, maybe you can pull some strings for me and, get me out of this sort of ghost situation." I don't know. That might have worked been a little bit stronger, but at the same time, things are moving really quickly, and you just kind of want to move the story along. You only have 22 pages to make this story happen, so you are pressed for time. Munmun agrees to show her where this baby is, and then we get the very first inclination of what Death wants to do. We see that Laila Starr says, "Then this baby comes along and thinks he can change everything. Not if I get to him here." And Munmun says, "You're going to kill a baby because you got fired?" There's a silent panel, and then Laila Starr says, "Yes." This is the very first inclination we have as the reader, where it's expressed out loud that Laila Starr is on her mission. So this is the beginning of Act 2, the end of Act 1, and the beginning of Act 2, right? She wants to kill this newborn baby so she can get her job back. Pretty cold. I'm on board for it. It's pretty dark. I feel like there's something about character audacity that hooks me every time. And I think the funny thing is there was like a time, like almost like an era of television or in film where we had so many characters doing audacious things. Like think about like the first season of Game of Thrones, like that first episode where they push the child off the window ledge, like the shock, right? Neil LaBute is really good at doing character audacity. So there was like an era where it was just like characters were doing things that just made your jaw drop. And I feel like this idea of Layla Starr going and killing a baby is pretty out there. But yeah, I gotta watch and see what happens, right? So we have Mun, who is now like pushing back against this and saying like, you're not death anymore. And again, this is sort of the benefit of having this ghost character appear and create some not physical conflict, but like emotional conflict. Mun is pushing Layla Starr's boundaries and her ideas and saying like, hey, this isn't what you are anymore. You were death, but you're not death anymore. So we're now moving into the next page. And look at this. We are now on page 15. Think about this. We've got Layla Starr. We've started Act 2. Her objective is to get her job back, right? The very next page, she reaches her goal. She has found the baby. She's going to kill this baby and get her job back within like a page later. That is sort of, again, a bold choice, pretty remarkable. I don't think many people would pull that off. But at the same time, well, I'm not going to get too into it right now, but let's see. We have Layla Starr and Mun. They approach this tiny little baby that is completely helpless, and Mun says the baby's name, which is Darius. Again, sort of that pushback, and now it kind of spins Layla Starr a little bit. Now she says, "What? Why did you tell me that?" And Mun says, "He's got a name. You can't kill someone with a name." Layla Starr says, "Of course I can. How hard could it be? Just a tiny little thing." And then we have Mun kind of go into this like tiny little monologue, which is so good. And I think this is what Ram V does really well. It has, well, let's just read it first. "Trust me, Layla, I've been here a long while and seen my share of broken people. Sometimes they're rich and dressed in nice clothes. Sometimes they own nothing other than the rags on their backs. Sometimes they have whole families waiting, and others, there's just a nurse telling them it'll be okay. Maybe it's easy to miss it when you're a god, but when you're immortal, there's always a moment. Amid the pain and despair and all the indignities of a dying body, there's a moment of grace. It's always sad and it's never easy. Death." This little monologue that Mun has is enough of a pushback against Layla's ambitions, against Layla's desires to get her job back, that she can't kill this baby anymore. Such a great sort of verbal pushback that pushes a character, that changes that character. And just like that, our story is now done, right? No, of course not. We have Layla. She has this goal. She can't do it anymore. She can't kill this baby, which is crazy. So it's like you've essentially ended the story. You've set her on this mission. She set out to do it. She found the goal. She can't complete the mission anymore. But this comic runs for 5 issues. So what else is the rest of the story going to be? And we're only on, page 15 right now of a 22-page comic. So a lot of questions right now, which we're going to get to. But that's what makes this thing really intriguing. On top of that, I want to say this is what Ram V does really well. I think he has such great insight into the human experience that he puts on the page. Even with this tiny little monologue that Mun has, that makes it just gives such great insight into the human experience that I really think he's worth reading, just for his point of view on humanity. And I got to be honest, when you're doing a 22-page comic, to kind of have like an emotional, or even just like of something that can hit home with some readers, that's really difficult, especially in 22 pages. So the fact that like this is the pushback that Layla gets that makes her change her mind, this sort of observation that Layla as a god never had, it's pretty amazing. I really it really did move me, and I was like, okay, this is a story worth sticking with. Layla Starr figures out that she cannot kill this baby, and immediately the baby cries. Now look at this panel once again, sort of the sound effect in the background. The background drops out. The sound effect takes precedent in the background. Great drawing of a screaming baby, but like sort of the volume of this baby's cries just sort of fills the background of the page. Sort of a great use of lettering. Really love that. It alerts some of the hospital officials and security. Apparently, they've been looking for her because she was a corpse, and now she's back alive again, walking around. They don't know that the god of death is inside of Layla's body, but they think that she's had some kind of resurrection. And they tell her to put that baby down. And immediately we enter the next scene, which is sort of an action scene. So this is scene 5, 3 pages long. And I'm going to highlight that in orange because it is sort of an action scene. But something that's really great about this scene, essentially Laila Starr is being chased through the hospital by security, by hospital officials because it's almost, I don't know why they're trying to chase her. Maybe they're trying to get her back into a hospital bed to make sure she's okay, but Laila Starr panics and flees. And essentially we are put into a first person point of view, which is very different than what we've experienced before. Again, the narration comes back in, kind of sewing all this, I shouldn't say sewing it, as a continuing thread. As we cut through this action scene, again, a lot of long rectangular panels, very cinematic. Telling us what she's doing. She's running through the ward. She's running out of the hospital. She crashes into various carts, knocking people over. The ghost, we find out, inhabits the body of a nurse and assists Layla in escaping from the hospital. Again, first person point of view as she bursts out of the door of the hospital. And what does she do? She runs into the street and gets hit by a truck or a van. And she dies again. Now, think about this. This is called The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. So there's definitely going to be more deaths involved with Laila Starr. So we've seen 2 so far. But technically, you could end the story here. She's gone on this adventure. She's failed at the adventure. Has she become a different person at the end of this adventure? Not necessarily yet. But as a short story, you could probably get away with it. I mean, not a big internal character arc, but definitely the big plot arc, right? The big bad story arc. All right, so here we go. This is the very last scene of this book, scene 6. It is 3 pages long. We're introduced to the narration once again. It says, "It was all over the newspapers for a while, the girl who died and lived again. It made the rounds among the hospital staff, but then people forgot, or the stories took on meanings and turns of their own, as stories often do. Soon, no one thought about Laila Starr. No one but me, that is, as I watched through the curling steam of my morning tea. The girl with the raven hair, who was also death and meant the world to me." So we are introduced to Prana here. He is the god of life, and he has brought Laila Starr back to life. And her first comments as she wakes up is, "Have you been standing there watching me sleep the whole time?" Not the whole time, no. Still super weird Prana. So Laila Starr is a little confused. She's not sure how she got there. The last thing she remembers is running out in front of that truck. And Prana says, "Well, yeah, you died. You were run over by a 12-wheeler, and it wasn't pretty. But I brought you back, old time's sake. There's got to be some perks of being god of life, right?" And then Laila Starr confesses that she couldn't do it. She couldn't kill this baby. The one who put her out of a job and pulled me onto this earth as a mortal. He was just a baby. How could you bring someone like that into being? And then we're kind of hit with this, I'd say, 3/4 splash page, the very final page, page 22. Again, sort of a beautiful landscape, great composition. Love the colors in this. Love the sketchiness, the looseness, such great energy. And then we see the two characters talking. Prana says, hey, I only give them a lifetime, every one of them. What they do with it is between them and you, I suppose. Besides, if you're still keen, in the final panel, he's not a baby anymore. So there we go. We've got this hook that has been reintroduced, which I love. I love. The very end says 8 years from the day Laila Starr died twice. So we know she's died and 8 years have passed and she's been brought back to life again. And we get this shot of her expression as she's drinking tea. She couldn't kill a baby, but now he's 8 years old. Can she kill an 8-year-old and get her job back? Such a great way to like sort of end the story and then bring us back in. Oh, it's such a great technique. And Ravi is really good at doing this. And like I said, there are 4 more issues after this. That is definitely a journey that I want to see. I want to see how she changes as a person and if she's able to pull this off. If you haven't read The Many Deaths of Laila Starr, I would highly recommend it. But before we finish this video out, let's take a look at this 10,000 foot view of the story map and kind of take a closer look and see what's going on here. Okay, so here we go. We've got scene 1, 3 pages, right? And that's our ordinary world. It's an introduction. We understand that this is a contemporary setting. We're actually getting sort of a bit of a vignette, I'd say, of like the city, the mother about to give birth, and the mortal Laila Starr. And then we go into scene 2, where we get our introduction into heaven, and we see that the god of death is riding an elevator, and we get hit with our inciting incident, which is she is being laid off from her job by God because a baby is being born who will invent immortality. Again, sort of the ordinary world here is like not just contemporary Earth, but contemporary heaven, I would say, in a very corporate environment, which I think is really well done. So then we move into scene 3, where Laila, or I should say Death right now personified, is attempting to convince the assistant to leave her or to bring her back into a hospital that is pretty close to the baby. And then scene 4, we have Death now in the body, or in the corpse, or inhabiting the corpse of Laila Starr. And we finally get her clear objective of what she wants. She wants to kill this baby and get her job back. Let's simplify that. She wants to get her job back, and she thinks the way that she can do that is if she kills this baby. Within 3 pages, she states her objective, she finds her objective, and she fails at her objective. Pretty remarkable storytelling right there. To do that in such a short amount of time and have it work is amazing to me. In scene 5, we have an action scene where she is being chased out of the hospital, ends up getting hit by a truck and dies. And then in scene 6, the final scene in this 22-page story, she's brought back to life by the god of life. And at the very end, and she states that she could not kill this baby, but at the very end, we're brought back in where we're told the baby isn't a baby anymore. Now he is 8 years old. And she could have another shot at getting her job back. So what a great sort of setup. Very tight, very efficient. Like I said, the only things that sort of stand out to me are a little bit are the fact that Mun didn't really have her own self-interest. She was just there to kind of help Laila Starr. Unfortunately, Mun will not appear, I don't believe, in the rest of the story, so it's just kind of a one-off character. That's unfortunate, but all in all, hey, it's still a really great story, worth the read. Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Dan from the future a little bit. I'm actually editing the video, And I'm realizing that at the beginning of this video, I mentioned about workshopping the log line, and I did attempt to do it when I recorded the original video, but I kind of put myself on the spot in that I didn't actually think it through, and I tried to do it on camera, and it was terrible. So since recording and now that I'm editing, I've had a lot more time to kind of think about the log line. So let's workshop it right now, and I'll kind of go through my process and how I create log lines, and let's change it up a little bit and see what let's go back and see what the original one looked like right now, and I'll read that to you now. With humanity on the verge of discovering immortality, the avatar of death is fired and relegated to the world below to live out her now finite days in the body of 20-something Laila Starr in Mumbai. Struggling with her newfound mortality, Laila has found a way to be placed at the time and place where the creator of immortality will be born. But will Laila take her chance to permanently reverse the course of future history, or does a more shocking fate await her? So again, a decent logline gives you the idea, kind of illustrates the big conflict that she's going to encounter. But I think we can do a little bit better. And so let's kind of work through what I came up with. So one of the things that I like to do is I try to keep my log lines down to like 2 sentences. And normally that first sentence will be sort of establishing the ordinary world a little bit. But since this story is kind of contemporary with, mythological or fantastical elements, still set in like an office building, so I still kind of consider it contemporary. I don't need like an establishing sentence to establish the ordinary world in a log line. Like, for example, if it were like Star Wars, you would need that log line of a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, talking about spaceships and Jedis and all sorts of things to kind of set up that ordinary world, right? And then you'd come in with your inciting incident where a farm boy sees a recording and decides to leave his life behind and go save a princess. But so that we don't need that actual establishing first sentence in this log line. So what I ended up doing is I came up with this sentence using when. When is a keyword that I really like to use to establish that inciting incident. But here we go. Here it is. It's when a baby is born that will invent immortality, the god of death is laid off and given the mortal body of Laila Starr to live out the rest of her days. So establishing immortality, the baby, and death having a job, right? So it drops the inciting incident. She's laid off. And now the second sentence is going to sort of not just show that big conflict, but also that internal conflict that she's going to wrestle with. And the second sentence is, death is determined to kill the child and get her job back while wrestling with her newfound humanity. So that's kind of how I like to do log lines. I always try to deliver that big conflict as well as that internal conflict that the character is going through, because I feel like that internal conflict is what really makes stories more interesting for me. Now, I should have prefaced this whole thing with log lines are incredibly subjective, right? Someone's going to say this is great, another person is going to say this is trash. Absolutely fine. It's just the way it goes. It's to each their own. But this is just how I like to do it. And hopefully, maybe you have your own tips and techniques for making log lines. I'd love to hear them. Please put them down in the comments below. But that's what I came up with for the story. I think it works. I think if someone were to hear this, they would like it, and they would say, like, yeah, I would definitely want to read that. And I do think it's stronger than the original one, just because it does illustrate that internal conflict, which I feel like is just like, it's a little bit of flavor. It's a little bit of seasoning. At least that's how I feel about it. But again, I want to hear what your thoughts are, so leave it in the comments below. If you want to see a dedicated video of me kind of breaking down or maybe showing my logline techniques, let me know also in the comments below, and I'll create one and kind of walk you through it. Again, this is just sort of my technique. It's nothing concrete. It's just something I've kind of figured out over time, and I'm always trying to improve it. So let me know how I can make it better. But that's it for now. I'm going to take you back to original Dan, and he's going to finish out the video for you. Here you go. What are a few things that we can take away from this story that'll help us in our storytelling? One of the things that stood out to me was this idea of like the narration being a continuing thread that allows us to cut back and forth between scenes. That was a really cool technique that I definitely want to use at some point in my own storytelling. Another thing that I thought was really exciting about the story was the idea that he sets up Death's goal. She's trying to find this baby. She finds the baby the next page, and then in the very next page, she can't kill this baby. It really, as a reader, it really it creates that setup, and then right in the middle of the story, you're like, oh, this is over. This is where's it going to go now? It sort of creates that question. It's almost like you set up the big question, and then you've answered it right away. And then you leave this other hanging question, which is, where's the story going to go now? I think that is sort of a fun technique that I'd like to incorporate at some point. Those are the few techniques that stood out to me as a reader. If you saw any other techniques that I missed, please leave it in the comments below and let me know what you thought about the story. But yeah, The Many Deaths of Laila Starr is such a great story. It's definitely worth reading. And if you want to read some of my stories, definitely check out my latest books. They're up on Amazon right now. You can get them on Kindle, and maybe by the time this video comes out, they'll even be in print. Who knows? But check out the link below. It helps support the channel and helps me bring more videos like this to you so that we can all become better storytellers. That's it for the Story Grind. Thank you so much for listening and following along, and good luck with your own stories. Take care. Thanks. Bye.